What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the ARC Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Zachary, here with my co-host, Matt. Matt, how you doing today, brother?
Doing well, man. Doing well.
Good. So for those who are new tuning in, thank you for listening. This is the Athletes Resilience Center podcast where we talk all things mental performance in sports. This episode is going to be one that's fun for the two of us. So we have had some amazing guests so far on the show, and we kind of want to practice what we've been preaching about reflection throughout this whole process. And it's a huge part of the mental game is reflecting on what you've done in the past and building for moving forward and kind of the lessons learned that you've had. So we've had a bunch of amazing guests on. We're very fortunate and lucky to have these guys on. But today's episode is going to be looking back at our first 10 guests. And Matt and I are each going to have one takeaway that we've had with the interviews we've had from these people and kind of go over why it's important and the takeaways that someone listening can kind of learn from and take away. So we're definitely excited to go over this and kind of see what both of us choose and talk about. But yeah, I guess we can get started with our first guest that we had on, a close friend of the both of us, Donovan Casey. Now, Matt, what is the first takeaway for you that you had when we were interviewing with Donovan Casey?
Yeah, so DC. Yeah, obviously we've known him for such a long time and everything. But one thing that he really said that I took away from that episode was, find what makes you unstoppable, right? He's like, if I have my coffee, like, who can stop me, right? Like, and I think that's an important component for our everyday lives, right? Like, find something that you can kind of not necessarily identify yourself through, but something that you're like, okay, once I do this, like, today is going to be perfect for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a good takeaway because that was one of the most powerful moments we felt from him in that episode was him talking about like if I have my breakfast and my coffee, man, like I'm unstoppable for the day. And I feel like building that morning routine for anyone where you do that one thing that says, okay, I'm locked in on the day now, like I'm ready to go. That's a complete game changer for any person or athlete. So that was definitely a great takeaway. I think the one I found just knowing him for so long, and Matt and I just knew him as the center fielder who also chucked on the mound and shoved and was just an athlete and loved the game of baseball, but finding your passion and your love for life outside of the sport. And he talked about, kind of putting so much pressure on himself to perform that was everything he was valuing. But when he was able to take a step back and enjoy the things, the little things outside of the game, and spend time with his wife, spend time with his son, spend time with his family and friends, he really found an ability to feel comfortable with getting back in the game and not valuing his performance so much because he had so much other things going on. And I think that was for both of us. We had like a real aha moment with him just because knowing him and playing with him, it's like this guy was all baseball all the time. And hearing those statements, it's like, wow, that's really powerful. And we're really fortunate that he was able to find that because, both of us really enjoy having him on and hanging out with him. So that was great. I just loved hearing all that and his development and growth through the whole process. But next we had on Pat McCarthy right after, two bangers back to back.
Yeah, absolutely. And my Mets guy, Pat McCarthy. Always got to throw that in there. So I think for Pat, he made a really good point about like learning to embrace failure on your way up, right? Like as we go through our jobs, our everyday lives and everything, it's kind of like a ladder, right? Like if you just started your internship, you might be able to make a couple, mistakes here and there, and you learn from it, you grow from it, you get promoted, and then, kind of same thing. He kind of talked about, when you're calling games at the college level, like you can make some mistakes. You call games at the minor league level, like you can make some mistakes as long as you're adjusting. And then when you get to major league level, well, those mistakes happen, very far and few in between, or you find a way to kind of work around those mistakes and everything. I think it's an important lesson because, especially with Pat being a broadcaster, he's national, right? Like people are going to hear his voice, so they're going to know when he makes a mistake. It's very minuscule at that level. So, finding a way to embrace it on your way up so that when you get to that top level, you're able to go out and perform at a high level day in and day out.
Yeah, and I think, that minor league grind or that college grind is very
Hmm.
similar to just being a collegiate athlete, right? And like a minor league baseball player. They're on the same journey. They're both trying to get to the top. They're trying to get to the big league. So yeah, no, I completely agree. I think his insight on that was really helpful. And I think the big takeaway for me, college roommate with Pat, like was a groomsman in his wedding, like very close with Pat. But hearing him talk about his legacy with his father and how his father is in the same job that he is aspiring to be in and he's working to be in, and how he didn't use that as either a crutch or something that he looked at negatively. He used that in order to kind of build more fuel to the fire and kind of get to where he wanted to go, and viewed that as, hey, I have someone in my corner who anytime I have questions I can ask him. Anytime I need, video to be reviewed, I can ask him to review it. And having that relationship and hearing his transition from, okay, I'm Tom's son, to now being, no, I'm Pat McCarthy and this is what I'm going to do, was really cool to hear, and hear that confidence that he's been building up, like saying, there are going to be pieces of my game that might sound similar to my dad's, but ultimately I got to do what I do best and make the calls that I make them very me. And yeah, I was very fortunate enough last weekend to meet his daughter. So congratulations to him and his wife Emily on that. But it was really cool to hear like that progression in his life and hear him talk about family in the way that he did. So that was really cool. But back to back, we had the second brother, we had Tommy on right after that. So what are the takeaways you had from Tommy?
Yeah, find your why. I think, Tommy, he spoke to this in a lot of different aspects kind of throughout the podcast that night. And I think the one that really I walked away with was, he begins his career at the Division I level as a player, and he ends his career as a professional player, but there was a lot of steps in between there,
Right.
including a stop at a junior college, and then he goes to TCNJ and everything. He ends up playing there, and that's the most fun he's had. Not necessarily that was pressure free, but he was able to fulfill his why and fulfill himself. Playing there, going to school there, and really getting to enjoy that experience in college.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I had a firsthand look at all of that when he came to TCNJ, and he brought, a great energy and happiness and carefree spirit. So it was awesome to hear him talk about that, because that journey was also, looking at it was tough for him in the time, but now he gets to look back and be like, it was the best decision I could have ever made, and I had a great time doing it. And I think for me, the big takeaway with Tommy was, playing with him in college and getting to play against him even in the Frontier League for a season. Like, I knew how much that boy eats, breathes, and sleeps baseball. Like, he loves playing the game of baseball, but being able to now transition into his role in gloves with Victus is just like it's a match made in heaven, right? And being able to find your thing outside of baseball that you're equally as passionate about, even though, playing was your whole life for the last 20 some odd years, being able to transition into this new role where you're still in baseball and you found this new thing that, 10 years didn't even seem like it was a real job, and now it is, and he's, fulfilling that and having a great time. Like, I thought that was just really cool to hear him talk about that, and, trying new things, and, jumping into that, potentially jumping back into broadcasting and seeing what he's liking. But I really appreciated him sharing his jump from professional baseball into the sphere that he's in now, and helping craft and make gloves with Victus, which is great. And then going from one Frontier League guy to another, we got Dakota McFadden next, who really brought the energy in our episode. What do you remember most about our episode with Dakota?
Yeah, he talked a lot about the resilience. Obviously, it wouldn't be the Athletes Resilience Center without we're talking about a little bit of resilience with our
Of
guests,
course,
right?
of
So,
course.
with Dakota talking about getting back up, right? Like he's talking about pre-draft workouts. He's doing well. Teams are like, hey, you're going to get drafted. You're going to get drafted. He's getting calls. He's getting calls. 3-day draft goes by, and no one picks his name, right? Turning that fire and turning that, I don't want to say a struggle, but turning that, low point into a high point, right? Now he's with the Firefighters. He plays against the Savannah Bananas. He's doing what he loves to do. and he's having fun doing it, right? Like, and I think that was the biggest piece. Like, he's finding his why still through baseball, even though it didn't work out necessarily on the path that he thought it was going to work out with.
Yeah, I think for me the big takeaways with him, just I played with him, talking with him, like energy, 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 man. That guy is the Energizer Bunny. He's always up and at him. He loves the game of baseball, and he does a really good job at inspiring others and inspiring the youth to try to get, to where he is, right? Like, I mean, he was given a lesson during our interview, right? Like he was amped up, he was excited, he was juiced up, and he just loves talking the game of baseball. And I think he really talked about and showed like every single day, like you said, good or bad day, you got to bring that energy, and you got to, you got to want to be there, and you got to want to get better. And I think that's something that is unique to him. And I think something that when I played with him was really helpful. Like everyone on your team can feel that energy. So for that, like his energy levels just, make you want to be like, you know what, I need to also elevate my energy levels and get up there a little bit. Like be passionate about what you're doing every single day, even if it's the most mundane things, right? Like try to be the best that you possibly can be at that one thing that you're working on. But then we go right from Dakota into our first person in the mental performance space in performance coach Drew Hopper. So what do you remember about our episode with Drew?
Man, one of my favorite episodes, man. I loved getting the chance to get to know Drew through that episode. And, he talked about, transitioning from the corporate life into the coaching life and wanting to inspire people, right? And I think, one of the big things was he took a leap of faith, right? He knew that if he stayed in the corporate, job market, he could continue to make money, he could continue to do well, but it wasn't necessarily something that made him happy, and there was something he'd much rather do, and now he's doing that, right, with Performance Juice. And I think that him entering the coaching space, one, he's going to inspire a lot of different people, but that's also why he got into the field and everything. And I thought him doing that leap of faith, I think it speaks to a lot of, people that might listen to this podcast that, might be working one thing and they're like, well, I much rather go all in on something. And, he's a living testament to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. And it's really cool to see him make that jump and, start to work with a lot of high level athletes and see a lot of progress. And he's been able to help a ton. And, that's awesome. I'm always talking to him and we're comparing notes on things that we're both like researching and doing. So it's really cool to kind of have him in our corner and hear him talk about all that. But I think the big takeaway that I remember from the episode that, you and I have talked about a lot is growth through failure. And there's such a stigma obviously against like failure. Everyone has this fear of failing, and failure does X, Y, and Z. You don't want to do something that you're going to fail at. But he was talking about failing and failing and failing and how you can grow through that. And he used his experiences in the military, in jujitsu, in golf to kind of explain to us why it's important to be resilient, right? And why ultimately being adaptable as an athlete is one of your most important assets, and why he as a coach is very adaptable and very resilient, and his story and his experience. And I think the opportunity to be able to fail and grow through that is important. And it's just like you said, when he's jumping in and taking this leap of faith on coaching, it's like, just do it, just go, just try, right? You're going to fail on your way there, but each step through, you're going to continue to grow and continue to grow, right? It's just, you do something, if you fail, you reflect on it, you make corrections, and it's rinse and repeat, right? Until you get the right formula. So I think that was the big takeaway, was just growing through failure. And I think he did a really good job at explaining his story and explaining what he does with potential athletes. And then we have the next interview, which is also one of my favorite interviews, was working with Devin Smeltzer on the pod. And what do you remember about the pod with Devin Smeltzer?
Yeah, stepping stones, milestones, and main goals. I think he did a perfect job in just like, taking goal setting and making it real tangible for himself, right? And, he talked about, I wanted to go play Division I baseball. I thought that was a goal. It became a stepping stone, right? Like it became a smaller drop in a bigger pond, right? And I think our listeners can really take something away from that when it comes to, when you're doing your goal setting, like, is something just a stepping stone, or is that like your main goal? Is that really where you want to end up at the end of the day? Because it's hard. You have to adapt and you have to be able to adjust. But like when you reach what you thought was a goal and it starts to turn to a stepping stone, it's harder to kind of break down that wall and keep it pushing from that point on. So you have to be able to be a visionary, and I think Devin did a really good job of communicating that with the audience and making sure that we kind of saw the whole journey. And shout out to Devin getting signed again by the Detroit
Yes.
Tigers. So
Yes.
he's going to be on his way up and everything. It's truly a story of triumph so far.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I love the your main goals and stepping stones idea. I think that ideology is awesome because again, I think he used the example, right? Like a lot of kids set in their minds like D1 is their goal, right? And then they get there and it's like, well, I hit my goal, now what, right? Like
Right.
there's not much after that. And he's like, set your goals ridiculously high. And then each one of those mini goals are going to be stepping stones to get you to that main goal where, you know, right now, like you said, he went to Florida Gulf Coast, didn't work out at first. And at that point, if his goal was just, I want to go D1, right? He might have been like, I achieved my goal. Now I'm done, right? Who cares? Whatever. I'm done with baseball. I'm done doing this. But he used that as fire to be like, all right, I have this main goal. I'm just going to continue to use my stepping stones to get to where I want to be, which is ultimately back in the in affiliated ball, which he got to. So shout out Devin for that signing with the Tigers. But I think for me, my biggest takeaway with him was sticking to his process and staying you the whole way through because there were a lot of times in the conversations that we had, like I just brought up, like he's facing a little bit of adversity at FGCU where maybe they're telling him to do different things than he feels like he should. Or he used the example of when he got called up with the Twins, right? And he has his first start. And it's like, okay, like he's a rookie. We'll see how he does. And he comes prepared with this whole notebook full of notes that he had on the hitters that he's facing, right? And it's like, never change who you are at your core. And for him, right, that mental preparation every day, he's like, that's what's going to set me apart, right? And it's like, ultimately people are going to be like, you could take less notes, you could take more notes, or you could do this, you could change this, you could change that. But the whole way through, he knew what his process should look like and he trusted it and he followed it. And ultimately it's led to the success that he's had now. So he's really an inspiration on making sure you have a plan and following that plan to a T and making sure that you're dialed in on that. Cause ultimately, it gets him back to where he wants to be. So again, shout out Devin for signing with the Tigers. That's awesome. Now, we're going to a high school teammate of his. Next episode was with our former teammate as well, Jack Brandt. Now, what are your takeaways from our episode with Jack Brandt?
Yeah, I think Jack said it was a quote that someone else said to him, but he said, no such thing as a hard job. It's just a job that hasn't been done yet, right? And I think that's outstanding because one, like we do approach a lot of things as we go through our jobs, as we go through life, and we're like, man, this is difficult, right? Like it might be uncharted territory for us just yet, and that's why it's difficult. And then once we get by that, we now know how to navigate it, right? And so
Right.
it's a true quote, just I think in my personal daily life about just navigation, right? Like, all right, like I approach a wall, okay, do I jump over it? Do I go through it? Do I go around it, right? There's a lot of different ways to approach something that's like right in front of your face, but it just hasn't been done yet. That's why it's hard today. Tomorrow it might be a little bit easier, right? Just continue to work at something.
No, that's a great quote. That's another one that I also keep in my back pocket and use day to day because it's true. When something gets hard, it's real easy to be like, "This is hard. I'm just gonna like let it go." But it's not a hard job. It's just one that hasn't been done yet, and that fires me up. That's like, all right, even though this is something that is difficult and maybe something that a lot of people haven't done, I'm gonna be the first one to break the barrier and do that. And that's just Jack's personality, so that's awesome. But I think for me, the biggest takeaway with Jack was he talks about all of his experiences with his, college baseball teammates, his college football teammates, and then joining the military and having that crazy schedule, right? And being able to learn and grow from being on so many different teams, right? Like, I think it really has grown and shown in his leadership development, right? Like, he's a true leader of men and a great guy and someone who's now using that leverage of going to the Coast Guard Academy and going into law school, right? And joining these new ventures and trying these new things. And I really think he's able to develop all that from the teams that he had and learning those development and leadership skills from that, right? Like, I don't know if he'd be where he is today if he didn't have the skills from being a leader on the baseball team, being a leader on the football team, being a leader in the military specifically, right? Like all of those experiences have led to where he is today. Truly a one of a kind guy, one of our favorite people, man. He's truly a leader of men, and it was a great episode. I really enjoyed hearing his experience in the Coast Guard Academy and how it's propelled him to where he is today. So that was awesome. And then next, we had someone who had no idea who we were before the podcast, which is awesome that we got to connect that way and have him on. And he came in on a whim and he did not disappoint. And that was JP Hovey. So what do you remember about our interview with JP Hovey?
Yeah, JP, shout out to you, JP, keeping up with us even after the fact that we filmed the podcast and everything. And we're big fans of him. We're big fans of Make It to Midnight, and that's kind of where I'm gonna take this going, right? So the daily attitude shift. I think JP knocked out the park in this episode, man. Like, talking about Make It to Midnight and how we can shift our mindset from a daily to make it to midnight, right? And then the next day we're going to begin something else, right? Being inspired by the content he puts out, finding inspiration in a lot of different things as we kind of go through our daily lives. But, I think after that episode, I really kind of dove in a lot more on Make It to Midnight, but also trying to, do my own daily thing as we kind of go through and just trying to find, something each day, whether that be in the morning time or maybe that comes midday after lunch, finding something that inspires me to complete my day on a strong note every single day.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like the Make It to Midnight ideology and the reason behind it was awesome to hear. Mm-hmm. And, same thing, like you said, the daily attitude shift is super cool to hear, and just the way that you can approach different things. And he was one that also had a very resilient background into getting where he is today, right? Like he heard a lot of no's, he heard a lot of maybe next time, he heard a lot of maybe this time, but he overcame all of that and did what he needed to do, right, to get to where he needed to be. And ultimately, it's that daily mindset shift of make it to midnight, right? Like today might be a shitty day, but if you make it to midnight, you make it to tomorrow. And then guess what? Tomorrow's fair game. It's anyone's game tomorrow, right? Like whole new day. And I loved hearing that from him. But I think for me, the biggest takeaway with JP and kind of the Make It to Midnight page as a whole is his ability to take everyday television, everyday pop culture, everyday anything, and turn it into a teaching lesson, right? Like he just had, I think, a Make It to Midnight episode recently where he's like the top things I learned from SpongeBob SquarePants, like, and they're all life lessons that you can take and implement into your daily life. And I think it's such a creative outlet and such a unique perspective to, I guess, showcase. And it was really cool to hear him kind of talk about that and the way his brain works and how you can get inspiration from literally anywhere or anything, and how, a simple cartoon like SpongeBob is transferable amongst people, whether you play sports or not, whether you're into this or that, right? Like everyone knows who SpongeBob SquarePants is, and everyone as a kid probably watched SpongeBob, and being able to take lessons from that and share that with people is ultimately how you're going to connect more and more. So big shout out to JP, because again, he took a chance on the two of us without knowing us and came on and had a great conversation with us. So really appreciative that he was able to do that. But going from one banger episode to another, next we had on Hayden Sieg. And Hayden was someone I didn't know before the podcast. We got to meet through the podcast. It was really cool for me to be able to experience his journey and have him talk about his process and everything like that. So now I'll kick it back to you. What is the thing you remember most about our episode with Hayden?
Yeah, Hayden talked about constant adjustments and changing expectations, right? Like, I'd always heard about, the car crash, and I'm grateful that he was able to share that with us on the pod that night. And, I think the biggest thing is, like, he's going out, he's pitching an independent ball, he does well enough, he gets signed, and, before he gets a pitch in his first game, like, he gets in a car crash, right? Not his fault at all, but he's the victim of, the situation and everything like that. Right. Being able to then bounce back, to have that passion, to have that fire that's like, yes, this sucks. I could sit here and cry and moan and be like, oh, well, why did this happen to me? working through his faith, working through his perseverance and his drive to get back literally on the bump and be able to pitch again in the Los Angeles Angels organization, right? Like making it up to AAA and everything like that. Like, he's on the doorstep and he's a step away from the major leagues. But, if he took a victim mindset from that moment, he's probably not where he is today and everything. And so, shout out to our guy Hayden, man. He does great work, not only for his own personal life, but in the community, making change in the lives of everyone he kind of touches and everything. He spends his winter working with inner city, pitchers at the Anderson Monarchs organization. Like, Hayden's an A+ character, man. He's always knocking out the park.
Yeah, I mean, dude, he same one of a kind guy, man. He was great, and I think the biggest takeaway, like hearing him speak too, was just the ultimate fighter and just the absolute most resilient. Like he was someone who came in here and was very dialed in the interview, talking about his journey and his process of how he's got to where he is today. He talked about his performance anxiety when he was at St. Joe's, how he was able to overcome that, and you almost hit this peak where he's like, I'm getting signed now by the Angels and I'm feeling myself a little bit. I'm throwing better than I ever have. And then the car crash happens, right? And it's like, oh no, now am I ever going to step on a mound again? And then he comes back and he fights through it, like you just said, through his faith, through his determination, through his motivation, and is able to come back on the mound and ultimately continue to excel and get to one of the highest levels that you possibly can. And, ultimately just hearing him speak and hearing his thought process through it all and how resilient he's been, I just know whatever he's going to continue to do, he's going to be successful. And, there's no doubt that he's just going to continue to grind and be where he needs to be. So big shout out to Hayden, because he really inspired the two of us, giving his story to the both of us and sharing that process. So really appreciative for that. And then finally, to conclude this episode of A Look Back, the last episode of this will be the 10th episode, the 10th interview we had, which was with Justin Hagenman. Now, as a Mets guy, let's hear it. What do you have as your biggest takeaway with the interview with Justin?
Yeah, one, shout out, because I believe after that episode, he gets called up to the Mets.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He did strike me out when I was 11. So shout out to Justin for that as well.
People are calling it the ARC podcast bump. That's what I'm hearing in the streets.
Hey, if you come on the ARC podcast, you will be a major leaguer. I'm telling you that right now, right? Yeah, Justin, he did a great job, man. He talked about trusting in your process, even though you don't know what's around that corner, right? And, and he used this particular example when talking about free agency, but it's something that you can kind of take into every aspect of like your life, right? If you're looking for maybe a promotion within your own job, maybe if you're looking to change professions, change companies at your job, like you don't know what that market's going to look like. You don't know what the interview is going to look like. You don't know what's next, right? All you can do is worry about today, trust in the process that has gotten you ready for that moment, and continue to work hard while you're still here. Like be where your feet are at, work hard in that moment, and then when that time comes, and you'll be more prepared and you'll be more ready to kind of serve once you get that.
Yeah, I think through the conversation too, the biggest takeaway I had was just Justin's confidence, man. It's the confidence that he had in himself, and again, not in a cocky way. And of course, if you hear the verbiage and the tone that he used in the podcast, like he's so calm, cool, and collected. There was no cockiness about it, but it's this level of confidence where he trusts his ability and trusts all of the processes that he's put into place, right? Like knowing him, it's funny because both you and I knew him playing against him when we were younger, right? And he's a kid that always played with older, like he played up. He played with the older guys. Then he gets to high school and as a freshman and sophomore, he's getting innings at one of the best high schools in the South Jersey area, right? And he's always talking about, right? Like, I have this process that he stuck to and he believes in himself, right? And every level that he's been to, he's had success, whether that's going into high school and playing at one of the best high schools in the area, going into college and playing in the Big Ten, going into the minor leagues, or even going into the major leagues and making his major league debut, right? Like, he's had some great outings in the majors so far. And it's just this ultimate confidence within himself because of all of the bulletproof evidence that he's had in the past, right? It's like every level that I've been to, I've been able to succeed and dominate. And it's because of the processes and the work ethic that I've put in place, right? And having that trust in yourself is ultimately where any athlete wants to go and be, right? And I think that was a huge takeaway was be so confident in yourself because your processes are so dialed in that there is no doubt when you get to the major league mound that you're going to be able to get out major league hitters, right? And he showcased that that's the truth, man, because he's pitching great up there. So big shout out to Justin and for his continued success. We're really excited, man. But yeah, that's the first 10 guests. I think we're going to end up trying to incorporate this type of format every 10 guests we have on or so, just to kind of give everyone a look back at some of the guys that we've had on, showcase some of the takeaways that we had, because ultimately throughout this whole process, we've had a lot of guys on. We've had 15 guests on so far, with some guys coming up that's going to be really exciting, but we kind of want to be able to reflect and showcase on each of these guys because all of them have such unique stories and all of them have such unique takeaways that being able to kind of reflect on it and share with you guys again helps you guys if you want to go back and check out some of the old episodes that we have, but also just as a reminder, like, oh, I do remember when he said that, and might be a little pick me up for some of you guys that might need it throughout your journey. So yeah, no, it's a new thing that we're going to try to implement, and I hope you guys enjoy that. But Matt, I do have a question for you now. Now that we talked about, the first 10 guests that we've had, something that I was thinking was, like, obviously they're all unique stories. They're all very different. Can you think of, I'm putting you on the spot, so I'll give you a second, and I can also think and give myself an answer here. But
Right.
do you have one or two things that you've seen that's really, I guess, common amongst the first 10 guys that we've had? And again, also different, all from crazy different backgrounds, but just elite level performers at what they're doing. What are any, I don't know, similarities that they might show?
I think adjustments is number
Right.
one, right?
Right.
Like, some have life altering adjustments. Some have maybe profession altering adjustments that they have to make. And I think obviously it's the Athletes Resilience Center, right? If you deal with resilience and you're going to be on this podcast, you've overcome in some way, or you're in the current process of overcoming something, right? So I think the biggest thing that all of our guests have to deal with is some type of resilience. But the ones that have success, which is all of them, is based on the adjustments they make, right? Like, okay, this has now happened to me. How am I going to approach this and what's next, right? And I think the second part of that is the leap of faith. I think
Yes.
a lot of them
Yes.
have taken a
Yes.
leap of faith in some way, right? Like, some people might look and be like, oh, well, this guy played professional. Well, what was his leap of faith, right? It might have been the school he went to. It might have been electing free agency. It might be, going and choosing to sign with a particular team. It could be in, like Drew's case, right? Like changing a profession because it fit his why and it fit how he was going to
Right.
serve for the rest of his life, right? On a
Yeah.
personal level. I think that's the second biggest piece is like at some point, all of our guests have had to bet on themselves in some capacity, and all of them have taken that jump and found success on the other side.
Yeah, and I think those are great points. And I also think the big takeaway that I've seen also is this level of confidence because of their ultimate level of confidence in and belief in their processes that they've put in place, right? Like, I'm looking at all these guys. There's Donovan Casey, Pat McCarthy, Tommy McCarthy, Dakota McFadden, Drew Hopper, Devin Smeltzer, Jack Brandt, JP Hovey, Hayden Sieg, and Justin Hageman. All these guys, right, have this confidence level because they know what they are doing is what is right for them, right? Whether that's Justin saying, at every level, I've been able to succeed because of all the process I put in place, and that allows me to know when I jump up to the next level, I'm going to succeed again. Hayden coming back from injury, right? Going through performance anxiety issues in college, then overcoming that and having success, trusting his process through that, getting injured, hitting that little bump in the road, and then staying in that process and saying, all right, I'm going to continue this and I'm going to see where this takes me, and ultimately making back where it needs to go. JP talking about he heard no, 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 but knowing this is what he wanted to do and that he had a story to tell and that he could inspire others through video, right? And he was able to ultimately get some exposure and get a job with Bussin' and the Boys, one of the biggest podcasts in the world, right? And now he's diving into his own ventures, right? And it's just ultimately trusting what you do and trusting your process. Jack, all throughout the military, being able to trust, any of the commands that he has or go through any of his orders knowing that he's fully prepared. He's done everything in his capabilities to prepare for this exact moment, which has led him into being able to get into law school where he needs to be. We got Devin, same thing, right? Trusting his own process, following his stepping stones in order to try to reach his main goal. Playing in the Mexican League, which obviously wasn't his first, desired option this season. Getting an opportunity now to sign with the Tigers and play with the Tigers at this current point. That's ultimately trusting and believing in everything that you're doing. We have Drew and Dakota. Same process, right? Dakota, same thing, had a bunch of no's going through his process, getting draft calls, and it's like, you're going to get drafted. And then it's like, wait a minute, no, you're not. And he's like, what are you talking about? You're going to get signed. Wait a minute, no, you're not. Going through the indie ball route and finding a new route in banana ball that works for him. And it's great. And he's inspiring a ton of people. Drew, same thing, right? Trusting that your why is bigger than what you currently do. Being in a job and then transferring into being a coach of people, serving others and trying to make them better. And ultimately, in that process, you're also helping yourself, right? You're truly doing what you're passionate about. And I think that was really inspiring to hear from Drew. Pat and Tommy, both of them, right? Pat going through the struggles of minor league announcing, college announcing, going into getting a big league shot, performing under his dad's name and then finding his own name, right? Trusting your own process and your own abilities. Tommy going from professional baseball into his now professional sector, working in gloves and working with players every day, right? Like, he's someone that fixed gloves all the time when I was in college with him. That's a dream job for him, and one that was, all the stars aligned, because that's the perfect job for Tommy. And that's something where he's able to influence a lot of people and make a huge difference. And then lastly, we went over it, Donovan, right? Same thing. He had a lot of struggles throughout the minor leagues, hitting a wall, valuing all of his self-worth within his performance in the minor leagues. And when he didn't, getting really upset, hitting a rock bottom, as he said it, but then ultimately finding things throughout his process that worked for him, things that outside of baseball made him happy. So it's this ultimate confidence, because all of the things that they've put in place have allowed them to get to where they are today. And I think, like you said, ultimately, we're not going to have guys on if there's not anything they can talk about being resilient about. And all of these guys have shown the ultimate level of resilience and passion for what they do. And we've been really fortunate and lucky enough to have these first 10 guys on. So it's been awesome.
Absolutely. Knocked it out of the park, Brandon.
Yeah. No, and listen, I look forward to doing a review on the next 10 guys, and then the next 10 guys after that, and the next 10 guys after that. So we're going to keep this flowing, but we appreciate you guys all for tuning in. Let us know if there's anything else you want us to kind of incorporate in this. I think we're going to add a couple new either segments or sectors into some of the podcasts or content that we're releasing soon. So we look forward to that. And yeah, thank you guys all for tuning in.
Absolutely. See you guys.